Okay, welcome to day 2 of chapter 2. Today we're going to talk about multiplying polynomials. Again, nothing today should be super shocking. This should be a review from grade 9. So our first example here, we're going to take a look at an adding and subtracting polynomial, but I want to look at it in a different way. So yesterday we saw this same question, or a similar question, and I thought about adding everything in the second bracket or subtracting everything in the third bracket. Today I want to look at those instead as multiplication questions. So I've got my first bracket and there's nothing in front of that, so I can just drop the brackets and rewrite it the same way. So this is equal to 2x squared minus 7x plus 6. Now for the second bracket, I want to imagine the coefficient or the multiplier in front of that bracket. So here there is a 1 in front of this bracket and it's positive. So what I'm going to do this time is think about multiplying everything inside the bracket by positive 1. So I've got 1 times x squared and I get positive x squared. I have to always remember if it's positive or negative. And then I get 1 times negative 9 and that's a negative 9. And then moving into the next bracket, there's a negative sign in front, but that's the same as having a negative 1 multiplier. So I'm going to multiply everything in the second bracket by negative 1. Negative 1 times 4x squared is negative 4x squared. Negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x. And negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3. And then again, I can collect my like terms. Again, I end up with a 2x squared plus an x squared minus a 4x squared, so that's negative x squared. And then collecting the x terms, I've got negative 7x minus 2x, that's negative 9x. And then finally collecting the numbers, 6 take away 9 plus 3 is 0. You can write the plus 0, but you don't need to. So just a different way to think about the questions from yesterday. In our second example, we're going to expand and simplify, and this time the multipliers are not just going to be 1s. So we're mixing it up a little. This time the multiplier in front of my bracket is negative 7y. So I'm going to multiply everything inside the bracket by negative 7y. So my first one here, negative 7y times 3y cubed. To multiply these terms together, I have to multiply the coefficients first. My first coefficient is negative 7, the second one is 3. So I get negative 21 when I multiply them together. And then I multiply the variables one by one. Here there's only one variable, y. I have 1y out front times y cubed. Remember that y cubed just means y times y times y. So now I just have an extra y being multiplied. That's y to the power of 4. You might remember your exponent laws, which tell you that when you multiply two powers with the same base, you can just add the exponents. And there's a little 1 on this y. Moving on to the second term inside the bracket, I'm going to multiply it by negative 7y. So I have negative 7 times negative 1. There's like a little 1 in front of the y there. That's my coefficient. So when I multiply those together, I get positive 7. And then I take a look at the variables. I have a y times another y, and that's y squared. And then finally, my third term inside the bracket gets multiplied by negative 7y. And it's just 1 times negative 7y. So I still have a negative 7y. And that's it. There's no like terms for me to collect, so I'm done at that point. My next example is a little bit different. In this case, we've got two sets of brackets that I need to multiply. So some of you may have used the term FOIL for this, or you might have thought of this as a double distribution. So I think of it that way. I think of taking that x, and I need to multiply everything in the second bracket by that x. So I'm going to multiply the x by the first term in the second bracket. X times x gives me x squared. And then I'm going to multiply that x again, but by the second term in the second bracket. So x times 3 is positive 3x. Then I'm going to take a look at this negative 2. It is negative 2. And I'm going to multiply it by everything in the second bracket. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And then take that negative 2 again, multiply it into the second bracket. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. And then I can collect my like terms. So in the middle here, I have two x terms, positive 3 take away 2, so positive 1x minus 6. You can put the 1 in front of the x if you want to, but you don't need to. Okay, example C. This time I have a bracket with a binomial being multiplied by a trinomial. So again, I'm going to take everything in the first bracket, each thing, and multiply it by everything in the second bracket. So I'm going to take a look at the x, the first thing in the first bracket, and I'm going to multiply it by all three terms in the second bracket. So I get the x squared times my x gives me x cubed, and then the negative 4x times my x gives me negative 4x squared, and then the negative 10 times my x gives me negative 10x. Next, I'm going to take that negative 3 from the first bracket and multiply it by everything in the second bracket. I'm still on the same line in my work. I'm just going to keep going. So negative 3 times the x squared gives me negative 3x squared. Negative 3 times negative 4x gives me positive 12x. And negative 3 times negative 10 gives me positive 30. And then to clean this up, I'm going to collect my like terms. There's only one x cubed term. And then I'm looking for x squared terms. I have a negative 4x squared minus 3 more x squareds. That's negative 7x squared. So I'm just adding the coefficients there. The variable exponents do not change when I'm adding or subtracting. And then I collect the x terms, negative 10x plus 12x, that's positive 2x. And then there's only one constant, 30. And that's as simple as I can get. In example D here, I have one bracket being squared. So this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see students still making in grade 12. So you want to make sure that you really think about what does that squaring mean? And it means it's the same bracket times itself, right? Squared just means that thing times itself. So I can write out those two brackets, and then I see that I actually need to multiply everything in the second bracket by 2x. And so I get 4x squared plus 6x. And then I need to multiply everything in the second bracket by 3. And I get another 6x plus 9. When I collect those two middle terms, there's 12x in the middle. So no shortcut for this one. When I go back to the original question, some people try to shortcut this and then they end up missing out on that 12x. So make sure you really think about multiplying all four parts. In our next example here, getting a little bit more complicated, I have some multipliers in front of the bracket, but I also have a subtraction between two of those brackets. So first thing, I'm going to multiply the 2x through the first bracket. When the 2x is right beside the bracket, it means multiply with the bracket. So when I multiply these together, I get 6x squared minus 10x cubed. Again, I'm multiplying the coefficients and adding the exponents. And then in front of the second bracket, I have a negative 4, so I'm going to multiply that into the second bracket. And I get negative 4x squared minus 28x. Again, I'm just multiplying the 4 by the coefficient. And then negative 4 times negative 2 gives me positive 8. And then collecting my like terms, I am going to put my biggest exponents always at the beginning of my math or my algebraic sentences, my polynomials. So I always want my cubed term before my squared term. Move that to the front, and then I'll collect my squared terms. I have 6x squareds minus 4x squareds, that's 2x squareds. And then I have 14x, take away 28x, so that's negative 14x. And then finally, there was only one constant term, the 8, so there's nothing to collect. One more example here. This time we have 3 things being multiplied. 4 times the bracket times the bracket. And the biggest mistake I see here is people try to multiply one of the things twice. So whenever you're not sure, I want you to imagine instead of 4 times the bracket, imagine that it was 4 times 2 times 3. And ask yourself, how many times would you multiply by 4? Well, you would only do it once. So you're only going to multiply by 4 once. Don't multiply both things by 4, only one of them. Right? So here, in my numeric example, I might multiply the 4 times the 2. That gives me the answer of 8, and then I'm done with the 4. And now I take that result and multiply it by the 3. Sometimes what would make this easier in our algebraic one is to leave the 4 till the end. So sometimes that can be less confusing. And I'm just going to multiply out the 2 sets of brackets and put that answer in one bracket. So the 4 is just going to hang out till the end. I'm going to multiply the x through to the second bracket, and I get x squared plus 3x. And then I'll multiply the negative 4 into the second bracket, and I get negative 4x minus 12. At this point, you have 2 different options. You could multiply the 4 into the bracket, or you could collect like terms first. It doesn't matter, you have to do both things, so the order is up to you. I'm going to collect like terms first. So 3x's take away 4x's leaves me with negative 1x. You can write the 1 if you want to. And then I'm going to multiply the 4 into the bracket. So I'm going to multiply everything by 4. I get 4x squared. Subtract 4x, and then subtract 48. One more example. We've got example G here is one bracket being cubed. So again, you want to think about what does that mean and really write that out. So I get x minus 2 times x minus 2 times x minus 2. And I need to multiply these together one at a time. So again, I'm going to start at the end and multiply the last 2 things. We're just going to leave that first x minus 2 alone. So this x minus 2 here is not changing, it's just staying put, and I'm just dealing with those last 2. So I'm going to multiply the first bracket that I'm using, the first term into the second bracket. So x times x, and x times negative 2. And then I'll take the second term and multiply it into the second bracket. Negative 2 times x, and negative 2 times negative 2. Again, at this stage, you don't have to collect like terms, but I do find that it makes your life a little bit easier if you do that. Just less numbers to deal with. So I'm collecting that negative 2x with the negative 2x. Again, that x minus 2 is just hanging out front. I still haven't multiplied him in. That's what I'm going to do at this stage. So I'm going to take the x, the first term in that bracket, and multiply it by all 3 terms in the second bracket. I get x times x squared, x times negative 4x, and x times 4. Each time I'm multiplying the coefficients together and adding the exponents on x. Then I'm going to multiply the negative 2 into the second bracket. So the negative 2 just gets multiplied with the coefficient, and the variable and the exponent stay the same. So negative 2 times x squared. Negative 2 times negative 4x, when I multiply those coefficients, I get positive 8, and the x just tags along. And then negative 2 times 4 gives me negative 8. And now that I've got it all multiplied out, I can collect my like terms. So again, my biggest exponent on x comes first, and then my second biggest exponent on x, negative 4x squared minus 2 more x squareds gives me negative 6. When I'm adding or subtracting, I'm just adding and subtracting the coefficients, and I leave the exponents alone. And then I add the 4x and the 8x. I get 12x, and then the negative 8 tags along at the end. And that's it for today's lesson. So you can find the homework in the guide to help you through this week on your own. Have a good day.